Justin Trudeau will be spending his Christmas holidays reflecting on his future and whether he should stay on as leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. Christmas truly is the season of hope and optimism. Joining me today to discuss is former Liberal MP Dan McTeague. I'm Rachel Parker, and you're watching The Rachel Parker Show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Rachel Parker Show and Merry Christmas Eve. I am very impressed. You guys are obviously my most dedicated and diligent fans if you are spending Christmas Eve day watching the latest episode of the Rachel Parker Show. So thank you very much all for your support over the year. Today we are going to be talking to former Liberal MP Dan McTeague about his thoughts on what went down in Ottawa last week, obviously with Chrystia Freeland resigning and knifing Trudeau in the back on her way out. Dan, thank you so much for being here today. I just super quickly want to get, if you just had to sum it up in a few sentences, what are your thoughts on what happened in Ottawa with the Liberal Party of Canada last week?
Well, they finally stepped on a landmine and has left the Prime Minister and the caucus in a complete tizzy. I think it's clear that the end is near. If not for Trudeau, it is over. What really matters now is whether the Liberal caucus will have enough members of Parliament who will actually not show up the next non-confidence vote, or whether Jagmeet Singh will turn his back again on and renounce what he says one week with his desire to maintain and stay in power as long as possible. I think for the Liberal Party, the damage isn't just about what happens in the next election, where it's going to be slaughtered. It looks like it's going to probably have the effect on the Liberal Party for a generation to come. A lot of people will not vote for that party again, especially when they start to see the telling details of the carnage that has been brought about by having reckless and irresponsible and inexperienced people running the country.
So it sounds like you're saying there is no path forward for Justin Trudeau. He cannot continue. We won't see him again when the House returns.
None whatsoever, Rachel. I mean, if he does show up, it's pretty clear to me that he won't have much time left. There continues to be no business done in the House until the Liberals come clean with their $400+ million green STD slush fund production of papers. I know about that because I had done when I was a Liberal member of Parliament in the Harper government, and they produced it. They have to. You're required to do that. That shows the supremacy of Parliament. But I think for Justin Trudeau, the question now is how many weeks between what happened, last week when it came to Chrystia Freeland resigning and being able to say you make a graceful exit. I doubt he can do that at this point. The damage is done, and we're too far deep into this that he can extricate himself from what has been very bad public policy and very bad acting in this period of time.
When we talk about what you said about the Liberal Party has been essentially wrecked for a generation, Justin Trudeau not being able to have a graceful exit, do you think, at what point do you think would have been better for him to step down to keep the Liberal Party intact? Because it sounds like that's no longer possible. We're too far gone at this point. So when should he have stepped down?
Summer of 2023, when the polls start to show a pretty significant surge for the Conservative Party and a precipitous drop for the Liberal Party. NDP, it's the same as well. I think that would have been the writing on the wall for him. But for whatever reason, he can't understand the possibility that he's being rejected or that the emperor has no clothes. Whatever the case may be, he stayed in far too long, and the damage now for the past year, almost a year and a half, has been such that it was at first a 10% decrease, then the 15, now 20, even 25% gap between the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party. And the most telling part of this, I talk to my own children, and they're not children anymore, they're young adults who see that their future has been compromised by very bad public policy. And for that reason, they will never, ever support that party again, that brand, given that it could bring about that kind of public policy and is determined you're likely to bring it back should they have that opportunity. I see the Liberal Party merging with the NDP, and I think the Liberal Party's time as the real party in my time, as it was before me, is over and done with for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you talk about the Liberal Party in these terms. Obviously, being a former Liberal MP yourself, you were a Liberal MP from 1993, which, by the way, was 4 years before I was born. I was born in 1997, so I am the oldest generation of the Zoomers and very proud to be so. And then you exited politics in 2011, which I was still quite young at the time, just entering high school, just starting to pay attention to what was going on, especially in Ontario, where you had Kathleen Wynne. She created a lot of problems with hydro. That was when I started to pay attention to politics. Actually, the story I always tell is that the Avondale, which in Ontario is a convenience store, which was essentially the local candy store closest to my house, walking distance from my home, it actually closed because it could no longer afford to pay its bills as hydro prices, which is what we have in Ontario, went up. And that was for me, that was really the nail in the coffin. I said, okay, we got to do something about these liberals. And that was really the thing that made me pay attention to politics was the local candy store in my neighborhood closing. But you've obviously, you've spoken, you seem to think very little of Justin Trudeau. Was there ever a point when you did support him?
I think at the outset there was some promise that he could perhaps turn the things around for the party. I had no expectations of the Liberal Party coming back to power. I thought going from third to second would be quite a significant step forward for the party as it began to rebuild. But it was about 2015, 2016, when I was working at Gas Buddy, in doing a lot of my work in the United States, that I realized that what's happening in Canada was far more serious than concerns Americans have with energy prices. It was that we had a party that was no longer listening or connected to interests of ordinary Canadians and was prepared to heap on green policies through the so-called net zero programs that now we see are in full bloom. But at a time when it was 4 or 5 cents a liter, no one paid a lot of attention to it. I saw this play coming a long time, and what gave me that instruction was that for the longest time, in the Liberal Party, I was the consumer critic. I was the fellow who carried consumer issues, not just with energy, but also with food. I did a massive study on grocery concentration. I went after the Competition Act, and I didn't. There were no holds barred. There was a different parliament where we could actually talk to each other, even though we may not have the same partisan backgrounds. We did have a means of communication, and I was very successful in getting a lot of my points across at the time. What I recognized that this Liberal Party was more of a cult. It was the narrative was you could think only a certain way, you could only challenge a certain way. And while the Prime Minister kept saying, "Well, my members of Parliament are free to do what they want," say that's baloney. He handpicked them so that they wouldn't have different positions or different ideas than what he had put forward. And of course, the discipline has been extraordinarily stringent. Discipline that no longer makes the role of the member of Parliament one of being able to represent your constituents. Bottom line, the Liberal Party detached itself from common concerns that people would ordinarily have in favor of things like, politics of diversity, equity, inclusion, ESG, politics that really have nothing to do with the dynamic and the diversity of the country. And I think created a scenario where it was us versus them, and created significant social and political divisions in this country, the likes of which I've never seen, the likes of which a country wasn't able to survive in the past.
You've touched on this a little bit already, but I want to ask you if the Liberal brand is destroyed for a generation, where are those votes going to go?
Well, look, they're going to the Conservative Party first and foremost. I think most people are realistic about this and saying we cannot afford to have more social left-wing experimentation, and that with that the green catastrophism and alarmism that goes with it, and which is nothing more than just green grift for folks who come out there and espouse their nonsense. We have to do something about the foundations and the charities out there that are giving money to these organizations. We have to look at the fact the federal government gave $2 billion to green municipal funds, something that Paul Martin started way back in my time, wasn't meant to have municipalities start to pick up the green agenda. We have now, I think, a very clear path ahead in which we are going to have to look at Canadians from the perspective of middle of the road consensus building. There's a word you don't hear in politics these days. You certainly don't hear in the Liberal Party. Trying to find the genius where Canadians are at and have them more included in public policy decisions rather than engineering elections during a so-called pandemic, engineering elections that in which you offer to buy people and unfortunately turn a lot of people into parasites, mooches, because the only thing they want is give me some free stuff and I might vote for you. That doesn't work anymore. Not when you have a government that's ran up the tap, which we have a massive multi-trillion-dollar deficit, the which debt of which we have nearly $62 billion in deficits. These are things that would have alarmed the Liberals of my time, but alarmed Jean Chrétien, doing everything they could to ensure that the country's financial future looked a lot brighter, including the sustainability of social programs. So I think for the Conservatives, there's an opportunity to get back to the center. Short of the name Conservative, they can behave a lot like the Liberals were in the 1990s.
Obviously, last week, Chrystia Freeland tendered her resignation, did so in a way that seemed to knife Trudeau in the back. She seemed to be doing her best to preserve her own political career. And certainly, we're hearing that she has leadership ambitions, that she was intentional in distancing herself from the prime minister so that she would not be pulled down with his unpopularity. Obviously, last week there was also the Liberal Party of Canada Christmas party, and we heard that Chrystia Freeland showed up with more supporters than Trudeau, that the lineup for photos with Chrystia was longer than the lineup for photos of Trudeau. Chrystia Freeland, to me, she seems really completely tied in with the failings of the Trudeau government. I think it'll be difficult for her to distance herself from Trudeau to Canadians writ large, maybe not the Liberal Party. If she proceeds with intentions to run for the Liberal Party leadership, do you think that she has what it takes to become a Prime Minister of Canada in the future?
Definitely not. She's tainted not with just with the Trudeau agenda. She went along with it. She ushered other, very capable cabinet ministers out of office, not just cabinet ministers, but also women cabinet ministers. And we all know about Jody Wilson-Raybould. We know about Jane Philpott. She greased the rails and was very much a part of this, which is what a real problem for this Liberal caucus and its ministers is that they're seen as being part of the reason the party has fallen apart today. They gave Trudeau the standing platform on which he could continue his stuff, and so I don't see any of them being successful. I think it'll be an outsider that takes over the Liberal Party, and ultimately, as I said, the Liberal Party may very well be relegated to a position it hasn't been very familiar with, at least in this century, being one of the most successful political organizations in the world up till very recently. It's likely that the Liberal Party will cease to function for a period of time in which the totality of the damage has been done. The lack of credibility, the concern about corruption and bad behavior and overspending, as well as ethical breaches left and right by its ministers. I mean, I don't think we understand exactly what's happened yet because the government's been able to keep these all hampered down and frozen. What's going to happen in the new government is that these things will now be allowed to, to the light of day while Canadians have said, yeah, we've already made our decision, let's move on. No, I think this is the extent to which this government has misbehaved, miscalculated the public, and taken their role in institutions as and abused those roles. I think it's going to leave not only the opportunity for the next few years to sift through the damage that's been done, but also to ensure that that party, in its current form, the cult that I believe it is, remains in the penalty box and never seen for quite a few elections away. I won't have to worry about that when I'm 80 years of age and the Liberal Party reconstitutes back to the center of the political spectrum.
When you talk about the fact that the Liberal Party will need to rebuild and the party in its current form will be done away with its entirely, one of the issues that I've had, obviously, I got my start as a reporter in the mainstream media. I've now moved to independent media. Me over here at True North, we've got very little access with the Liberal Party. They're not too keen to speak with us, rarely agree to do interviews with us, if at all. If this party does indeed rebuild, as you predict it will, how do you see the opportunities for new media? How can we bridge that gap between new media and the Liberal Party so that we have a working relationship, a functioning, adult, healthy professional relationship once again? Or I would actually for the first time.
Well, let me get out of the business of politics and talk about my own experience with energy. There was a time where what day wouldn't go by where I wasn't doing 20 or 30 interviews on energy prices that are important to Canadians. I'm lucky to have 5 or 6 now, and that's because mainstream media, the legacy media, has completely gone the same direction Trudeau and forgotten the very people that want to watch, listen, or read their work. If it's not relevant to the bottom line for Canadians, chances are you're going to make yourself as irrelevant as the federal Liberal Party is going to be in the next federal election, and as I said, for some time to come. So I use my own experience of saying, here there's something in terms of energy prices, all the things that we predicted that people thought were very terrible, especially the media said, no, we don't want to talk about that. Well, you have to talk about inflation being the result of higher energy prices. And when you put a carbon tax and other measures that weaken the Canadian dollar, it adds not only to the price of everything we consume in this country, it diminishes the value of the Canadian dollar, which erodes the purchasing power. The fact that many in legacy media have refused to understand that and think, well, hey, you're not being trendy, or you're not being liberal, you're not being with the times. I mean, shows the extent to which they have divorced themselves from reality. That's why I think new media is in fact going to be the standard media going forward. And those who did not follow this, especially the government being forced now to say, "Hey, we can't spend $1 billion throwing money or whatever amount at failed journalism. We're going to have to look at a new brand. You're going to sink or swim." And unfortunately, that kind of circumstance, those who've said, "Well, we can still do the woke agenda that the prime minister's cultural identity and political, nonsense," if they believe they can go down that road, good luck. Try to get the funding for it. That was a different matter.
Well, I certainly hope you are correct in your predictions. That the Liberal Party brand will need to completely change what we're seeing now. The cult will be done away with, and also that new media will become the standard in the future. Dan, thank you so much for your insight today.
Great to be here. Merry Christmas to you and Happy New Year to all your viewers.
Thanks so much. That was Dan McTeague, a former Liberal MP, giving us his take on what's gone wrong with the Liberal Party, what we can expect to see in the future. Okay, everyone, that wraps it up for the Rachel Parker Show for today. We won't have an episode tomorrow because it is Christmas Day. I hope that you guys will be enjoying your turkey or your ham with family or friends or whoever you want to celebrate with. I hope that you guys have a very Merry Christmas. God bless you all. I will see you just before the end of the year.